When I tell you that you could earn $1 million tax-free in your spare time, you'll probably think that I'm lying, selling a scheme, or I'm one of those wild-eyed guys on the internet who throws his hands at the camera and screams. But none of that is true. I strive to be honest in all manners, and there's no hucksterism involved in this. And when you know the details, you'll recall this strategy as well. So right up front, let me tell you what it is. It's section 26 U.S. Code section 121, and it's described further in IRS topic 701. And in a couple of minutes, I'll give you a practical description of how this works. But first, this caveat: the information today is for entertainment purposes only. For financial advice, see an accountant or other qualified financial advisor. Now, before we get into the details of how to do this tax-free technique, let's talk about our first jobs. Mine was in 1973 when minimum wage was $1.60 an hour. Now, I happen to have been 14 years old in 1973, and you need to be 16 to work in the state in which I live. But all I did was put an earlier birth date on my job application, and I got the honor of helping clean up rat feces in a restaurant that had failed its health inspection. It must have been summer then, and I had extra time, and certainly the restaurant needed the labor so that they could get open and get to making money again. And I racked up about 20 hours of work, and I did the math, and I expected a paycheck of $32. Imagine my shock when, after federal tax, state tax, Social Security tax, unemployment compensation fees, and so forth, I got about 2/3 of the sum I expected. That was my first hard lesson about the effect of taxes on income, and I think if you think back, you'll have had that same lesson. These lessons continued through my life. There was a time at which I earned pretty good money, all of which was ordinary income, and tax rates were higher back then, and I would put away 50 cents of every dollar I made to pay federal and state taxes, and that really hurt. Since my first job, and reinforced throughout my life, I've learned that tax-free money is the sweetest money of all and should be sought whenever possible. The tax section that I'm talking about, section 121, is an exclusion from taxation for the sale of a primary residence that you've occupied for 2 years. And this exclusion can be repeated every 2 years throughout your life. Most states have exactly the same exemption from state tax, but you should be sure to double check in your state to be sure it's true. Every 2 years, you can exclude $250,000 of gain on the sale of your primary residence as a single person, or $500,000 of gain if you're a married person. Now, you might say, holy cow, this strategy involves moving every 2 years. Why would it be worth it? And let me tell you, I can give you 1 million reasons why. It is reasonable to expect that if you buy a house well, remodel a house well, and sell it well, you can make $50,000 every 2 years. If you repeat this throughout your life, starting with a sale at age 22 through age 62, you'll have put away $1 million tax-free. Now that's very interesting, but imagine if you took that money and you invested it. If you earned 7.5% interest every year, and this is calculated with an online calculator, assuming an annual $25,000 investment instead of a biannual $50,000. But if you did it at 7.5 interest, you would have $5 million by the time you were 62 years old. If the interest rate were 10%, the approximate return on U.S. stocks over the past 30 years, it would be $10 million. And if the interest rate were only 5%, a sum you can get on an FDIC-insured certificate of deposit nowadays, it would be $2 million over that time. Now, of course, the earnings, the $5 million or $10 million, would not be tax-free. But there are other strategies. You could say, pile your gains on each house tax-free into increasingly expensive houses over the years, sell your $5 million house when you were 62 and have all of that money tax-free if things work well for you. Or you could siphon off as much of this tax-free money as allowed into Roth IRAs and other investment accounts. But that's way beyond the scope of this short video. But wait, there's more. If you reinvested some of your gain in better and better houses, you could do something called climbing the property ladder. With each move and each house you sold, you could live in a better and better house that you probably would not ordinarily be able to afford on just your salary. And this is possible because every time you buy a new house, your basis in that house increases. You buy a house for $100,000, you sell it for $200,000, you buy the next house for $200,000, you would only be taxed on the gain over your basis, the $200,000 on the sale 2 years later. Let's talk about me for a second. I bought my first house for $70,000. I did very little work on it. I took down an old style divider between two rooms and put in what was then a very stylish glass brick wall. Remember Miami Vice? I added a cabinet to the kitchen and I painted some exterior trim. I sold that house 6 months later for $87,500 and I pocketed $10,000 profit in just 6 months. At this point in time, the IRC section we're talking about now had not been adopted yet. But there was a section that allowed you to roll your profit from the sale of a residence over into another house that costs the same or more and not pay tax on it. And I took advantage of that, and it did not require 2 years of occupation of that house. At the time I was working, I had a reasonably good job, and I could put away $10,000 in savings a year. When I did the first house, I made $10,000 in my spare time in 6 months, and that got my attention. My second house I bought for $87,500. I sold it 6 months later for $115,000. Of course, that second house I did more work and put more money into. But then I started learning about more exotic financing, like wraparound real estate contracts, where you make money by lending your good credit to another buyer and so forth. In 7 years' time, I went from a 2-bedroom, 1-bath house on a main road that I paid $70,000 for to living in a custom-built 4-bedroom, 3-bath house with a circular drive out front, a swimming pool in the rear, and a view of a golf course. That was climbing the property ladder. There was no way I could have afforded that custom house without my investments in real estate. Now, who could buy a house at age 20? Well, for example, me. I started college early at age 16, graduated at age 19, interviewed for a job and impressed the gentleman at that interview with my accomplishments at a young age. Started earning a good salary, saving money, and at age 20 I had the money for a down payment and adequate credit to get a mortgage. I went out, found a house, signed a contract to buy the house, and it was all perfectly doable. But two things didn't work out. First off, that was in the 1970s, and this IRC section that allows the 2-year gain tax-free was not adopted until 1997. Second thing, I was a 20-year-old man, basically still a boy. I went home, I couldn't sleep, I said, I'm way too young to buy a house. I eventually backed out of the contract to buy the house, and a little bit later on quit that good job, went off traveling, had a bunch of adventures, and eventually enrolled in graduate school, and I followed a kind of a non-conventional career path since then. But my point is, if that IRC section had existed in the 1970s, and if I had known about it, I might have done things differently because the lure of tax-free money is that strong. So you can see from this presentation that it is possible for you to put away $1 million in tax-free money over the course of your life. If you invest those through the magic of compound interest, that $1 million could grow to $2, $5 or $10 million by the time you reach 62 years old, an appropriate time for retirement. Now, it does involve some effort. But that effort can be fun. You can learn about investing in real estate. You can learn about designing and remodeling real estate. And those are some of the reasons home remodeling shows are popular on TV. People like it and they enjoy it. And by doing this, you can also get the reward of living in a much nicer house than you could ordinarily afford. If being rich were easy, everyone would do it. This technique involves a little bit of effort, but it is completely legal, completely true, and if you follow it, you could be completely successful. You don't need to start at 20. Anybody of any age can sell their home and pocket up to $250,000 tax-free for single people every 2 years. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and thank you for watching.